Welcome to Midnight Clues.
With Clara Monroe and Elias Gray, we pull apart the stories the world can't stop whispering about. Okay, let's dive in. Fall River, Massachusetts, 1892. You hear the names Andrew and Abby Borden.
And you immediately think of, well, an axe, right? It's one of those cases.
Exactly. A brutal double murder, husband and wife, in their own house. Just shatters that image of a quiet little town.
It really does. And suspicion falls, pretty quickly actually, on their daughter, Lizzie Borden.
Yeah, Lizzie. Not exactly your typical suspect profile, you know?
Not at all. And the trial that followed.
Wow.
It was a media sensation. Dark family secrets, maybe revenge.
And that big question hanging over everything, was she guilty? Did she actually do it?
That's the core of it, and why we're still talking about it. There's just so much ambiguity.
So we've gathered a whole stack of material, articles, analyses, bits from trial transcript.
Right, trying to piece together what happened. We want to look at the family, the events leading up, the trial itself, and all the different theories.
Our mission basically is to sift through it all, pull out the key takeaways for you. Why does this case still grab people?
Let's start with the family itself. Andrew Borden. He was loaded, right? Real estate, banking, textiles.
He was, but here's the weird part. He lived like he wasn't. Super frugal.
Yeah, that's striking. No electricity, no indoor plumbing, not even city water.
For a guy that rich,
Right.
in that community, it seems odd. What does that tell us about the family vibe?
Well, you can imagine his daughters, Lizzie, she was 32, and Emma, who was older, 42. They must have felt that, living so sparsely compared to others in their social circle, especially up on the hill.
Right. It probably wasn't just about comfort. Maybe it felt like a statement from him about his priorities.
Could be. Definitely a source of tension, you'd think. Resentment, even.
And then there's Abby, the stepmother.
Ah, yes. Mrs. Borden, as the sisters called her. Never really mother.
They thought she was just after his money, basically.
That seems to be the general feeling they had, yeah. And it showed. They apparently rarely even ate meals together.
Wow. So a really divided household, just living under the same roof, but separate lives?
Pretty much. And inheritance. That was a huge sore spot.
Right. Didn't Andrew give a house to Abby's half-sister?
He did. And Lizzie and Emma were apparently furious about it. Felt like their own inheritance was shrinking.
You can see why that would cause friction. And wasn't there some weird thing with them buying and selling back their childhood home from him?
Yes. That transaction.
Yeah.
It's peculiar, isn't it? What do you make of that?
Maybe trying to get some control? Or get his attention financially? It definitely suggests things were strained. Money was clearly a battleground.
Okay, so fast forward to the weeks right before the murders. Things get even stranger.
Yeah, a string of really unsettling incidents.
Andrew killing those pigeons in the barn with a hatchet. Pigeons Lizzie apparently cared for.
Oof. That feels pointed.
Doesn't it? Then there was a burglary, but Andrew told everyone not to talk about it.
Keep it quiet. Why?
Good question. Then the sisters take off to New Bedford after an argument.
And Lizzie doesn't come straight home, right? She stays somewhere else first.
For 4 days. At a rooming house. Before finally returning.
And the poisoning scare?
Yeah. People in the house were feeling sick. Abby suspected the bread was poisoned.
So putting all that together, the pigeons, the burglary hush-up, Lizzie staying away, the poisoning fear, what's the vibe in that house?
It feels incredibly tense. Like a pressure cooker, maybe. Trust seems totally broken down.
Lizzie staying away right before. That seems significant. Why wouldn't she want to be home?
Avoiding the tension. Or maybe she sensed something bad was coming. It's hard to say.
And she went to her friend, Alice Russell, right? Saying she was scared.
Yes, expressed real fear. Said she thought the bread and milk were poisoned, that her father had enemies, someone was watching them.
So genuine fear. Or something else. Could she have been laying groundwork, suggesting outside threats?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It could be read either way, natural fear, or maybe creating a narrative.
Let's also quickly touch on the house layout. It was renovated, but still kind of divided.
Especially that locked door in Lizzie's room. It separated her room from her parents' room.
Meaning you couldn't just walk between them easily?
Nope. You'd have to go out, use different stairs. It's relevant when you think about how a killer might move around.
Definitely adds another layer. Who could go where and when without being seen or heard? Okay, let's get to the day itself. August 4th, 1892. The morning.
Starts early. Bridget Sullivan, the maid, and John Morse, Andrew's brother-in-law who stayed the night, are up around 6 a.m.
Breakfast together.
Around 7 a.m., yeah.
Yeah.
Andrew, Abby, Morse, and Bridget. Though Bridget's already feeling sick, headache, nauseous.
Morse leaves around 8:30.
Yep, off to visit other relatives. That gives him a solid alibi. Andrew sees him out.
And hooks the screen door on his way back in. That detail. Why flag that?
Because it means the house was secured from the inside after Morris left. Someone inside would have to unhook it later for anyone to get in that way easily.
Got it. Okay, so Lizzie comes down, doesn't want breakfast. Andrew goes upstairs. Bridget feels sick, goes outside.
Vomits, actually. Andrew then leaves for his usual morning walk around 9 a.m.
Leaving Abby and Lizzie and Bridget, who's now been asked to wash windows.
Right. Abby tells Bridget to do the windows, inside and out, while Abby goes to tidy the guest room, which is where she's later found.
And Bridget goes out to the barn for cleaning supplies around 9:30.
She does, leaving Lizzie and Abby alone in the house.
And this is the crucial window for Abby's murder, right? Between roughly 9:30 and 10:30.
Exactly. And the forensic evidence, it's brutal. Abby was facing her attacker, hit on the head, fell face down.
And then struck again.
17 more times to the back of the head with a hatchet.
17 blows. That's incredibly violent. What does that number suggest?
Overkill. Intense rage, maybe.
Yeah.
Very personal. Definitely not a quick, clean attack.
Okay, so Andrew comes back around 10:30.
Finds the side screen door hooked, struggles with the front door key, so he knocks.
And Bridget, who's washing windows, she hears him knocking.
She does. And she also testifies. This is a famous detail. She hears Lizzie giggle from the top of the stairs.
The giggle. That's so unsettling. Where exactly was Lizzie standing, though?
Well, Bridget places her at the top of the stairs. But one analysis we looked at, VLDAR, they point out the bed in the guest room.
Right, might have blocked her view.
Exactly. So even if she was up there, she might not have actually seen Abby's body from that specific spot. The giggle is weird, but doesn't automatically mean she saw the body right then.
That's an important nuance. Okay, so Lizzie comes down. What does she tell her father about Abby?
She tells him Abby got a note about someone being sick and went out.
But that wasn't true.
Nope. A complete lie. The note was never found. She sticks to this story all afternoon, though.
Andrew then goes into the sitting room to relax. Bridget says Lizzie helped him get settled.
Bridget testified Lizzie helped him. But Lizzie later claimed she saw him change into slippers.
Which didn't match the crime scene photos. He was wearing boots.
Correct. Another inconsistency. They seem to be piling up.
It makes you wonder, small details maybe, but why the contradictions? Stress or something else?
It certainly makes her version of events harder to believe. Okay, so what does Lizzie say she did next?
She says she went to the dining room, ironed some handkerchiefs, talked to Bridget about a sale,
Okay.
then went out to the barn, said she was looking for iron to fix a door, and also lead sinkers for fishing. Claimed she was out there for, what, 20 or 30 minutes?
That was her initial claim. But that VLDAR analysis suggests the timing doesn't quite work. More like 10 minutes, maybe between 10:55 and 11:05 a.m.
10 minutes versus 30 is a big difference.
Huge. And her reasons for being in the barn kept shifting, too. First iron, then sinkers. It just sounds a bit shaky.
So she comes back from the barn.
And claims she finds her father dead on the sofa, head completely mutilated. This is around 11 a.m.
And soon after, Bridget hears the city hall bell ringing for 11.
And then Lizzie's famous cry, "Maggie, come quick! Father is dead! Someone came in and killed him!"
Maggie being Bridget, right?
Yeah, that was apparently Lizzie's name for her sometimes.
So if Lizzie did do it, that's an incredibly tight window. Kill her father, ditch the weapon, maybe clean up slightly, then discover the body.
Extremely tight, like minutes. If she's innocent, though, you have an intruder who kills Andrew, maybe waits around after killing Abby, and then vanishes without anyone seeing them in that small gap.
Neither scenario seems simple. What did Lizzie do immediately after?
Asked Bridget to get Dr. Bowen. He wasn't home. Then sent her for Alice Russell.
And a neighbor saw her, Mrs. Churchill.
Yeah, saw Lizzie standing near the open door, asked what was wrong. Lizzie said, "Oh, Mrs. Churchill, do come over. Someone has killed Father."
How did she seem?
The neighbor didn't report anything too unusual right then, just the plea for help. But when the police arrive around 11:15,
Her story starts getting inconsistent again, especially about the barn.
yes, and she repeats the lie about Abby getting a note and leaving. It's only then she sort of suggests maybe someone should check upstairs for Abby.
Only then, after claiming she was out, that feels calculated.
It does seem odd, doesn't it? Almost like directing things.
So Bridget and Mrs. Churchill go upstairs.
And find Abby's body in the guest room.
How did the police react to Lizzie?
Many of them found her too calm, too collected, not grieving enough, maybe.
And she made that comment about Abby.
Yeah, Mrs. Borden was not my mother. She was my stepmother. which, sounded pretty cold under the circumstances.
And critically, no blood on Lizzie, despite how messy the murders must have been.
It's a huge point. No visible splatters on her clothes, her hair, nothing.
How is that possible if she wielded the axe?
That's what the defense hammered on. Could she have worn something else? Cleaned up perfectly? Changed clothes? It raises major questions.
What about the initial search?
Pretty cursory, apparently.
Yeah.
Looked in Lizzie's room, the barn. They were criticized for it later, maybe missed things, like footprints in the barn dust.
Did they find potential weapons?
In the basement, yeah.
Yeah.
2 hatchets, 2 axes. An assistant marshal set 1 hatchet aside.
But there was another one.
Yes, a 3rd hatchet head. Found later in a toolbox in the coal cellar. No handle.
Handleless.
Yeah. And the break looked kind of fresh. And the dust on the blade was different from the dust in the box. That became a key piece of evidence, potentially the murder weapon head.
Broken handle, different dust. Sounds suspicious, like maybe it was cleaned and planted.
That was definitely the implication the prosecution leaned towards.
Okay, and then there's this weird incident late at night in the cellar.
Right. Officer Hyde sees Lizzie and Alice Russell go out to the privy. Normal enough.
But
Lizzie comes back alone, and the officer sees her bend over the pail that held her parents' bloody clothes.
doing what?
That's the thing. It was never fully explained what she was doing, just bending over the pail of bloody clothes. Alone.
That looks really bad. Very suspicious behavior.
Highly suggestive, yes. What legitimate reason would she have?
And the next morning, the dress burning incident. This is after the mayor told her she's a suspect.
Correct. Alice Russell sees Lizzie in the kitchen, tearing up a dress, says she's going to burn it because it has paint stains on it.
In plain sight of the police who were there.
Yep. Which is also weird. Why do it so openly if it's incriminating?
What dress was it supposed to be? The one she wore the day before?
Well, the dress she reportedly wore was a light blue cotton one, but the dress initially given to police as evidence was a dark blue silk dress. This one she was burning. The story gets confusing.
It sounds like she's trying to get rid of something. Paint stains or not, burning a dress right after being named a suspect. Doesn't look good.
Agreed. It screams consciousness of guilt, even if she claimed it was innocent.
Did they ever confirm the poisoning claims, test the milk or anything?
They did test the milk and the victim's stomachs. No poison found.
Okay, so the inquest. Lizzie testifies, but she's on morphine.
Yes, Dr. Bowen had prescribed it for her nerves, and her testimony was a mess.
Coso.
Contradictory statements, she seemed erratic, refused to answer some questions, like about her relationship with Abby.
Questions that might have actually helped her.
Potentially, yes. She seemed confused, contradicted herself about where she was when her father got home, claimed she heard no struggle despite the brutality.
Even though it was a small house, you'd think she'd hear something.
You would, but that whole testimony was ruled inadmissible for the actual trial.
Why? Because of the morphine? Or lack of counsel?
Likely a combination. She testified without a lawyer present and under the influence. Removing it was probably a big win for the defense.
And then finally, August 11th, she's arrested.
Yes. And the trial starts the following June 1893 in New Bedford, not Fall River.
Okay, the trial. Prosecution's case. What were their main arguments? It was all circumstantial, right?
Purely circumstantial. But they built a case around motive, the conflicts with Abby, especially over money. Opportunity she was home.
The attempt to buy poison the day before, was that used?
It was brought up but ruled inadmissible, like the inquest testimony. Big blow for the prosecution.
Okay, so what else?
Her suspicious conversation with Alice Russell the night before, the wildly inconsistent alibi, especially the barn story.
The dress burning.
Definitely. The presence of those hatchets, particularly the handleless one found later. The argument that a random burglar had no motive for this kind of overkill.
And the timeline.
Crucial. They argued the murders happened close together, making it unlikely an intruder could hide inside for that long without being noticed. Locked doors, suggested an insider.
Plus, Abby's murder must have made noise, right? Someone inside should have heard.
You'd think so. And that note about Abby leaving, only Lizzie mentioned it. No one else saw it. It was never found.
So, summing up the prosecution. Motive, opportunity, inconsistent stories, suspicious actions like burning the dress, and the unlikelihood of an outside intruder seems compelling on paper.
It does lay out a strong narrative, even without direct physical evidence.
Okay, so the defense, how did they fight back?
Their main line was, the prosecution hasn't proven guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. It's not the jury's job to solve the crime, just decide if Lizzie did it.
Fair point. What about specifics?
No handle found for that supposed murder weapon head. No blood at all found on Lizzie or her clothes, despite the gore.
That lack of blood is powerful, isn't it?
Very. They argued her being home doesn't mean she killed anyone. Being upstairs when her father arrived doesn't prove guilt.
How do they explain her inconsistent stories?
Basically, shock and stress. Innocent people under extreme duress might get confused, misremember things. Perfectly normal, they argued.
Okay, what else?
Andrew's frugal lifestyle wasn't criminal. Disliking your stepmother doesn't make you a murderer. The family sickness was just sickness, common at the time.
Her calling for Bridget.
Showed fear and innocence, they claimed. Confiding her fears to Alice Russell the night before. Why would a killer do that?
The cellar visit with Alice.
Innocent? Maybe checking on something, who knows? The dress she burned did have paint stains. They brought in the dressmaker and a painter to testify to that. So they had witnesses for the paint. They did, and argued the dress she actually wore that day had no blood.
What about the handleless hatchet head?
They pointed out it only became a focus late in the investigation, and crucially, no blood was found on it either.
Could a killer have gotten in while Bridget was outside washing windows?
Defense argued yes, absolutely. And the idea of Lizzie committing 2 brutal murders, changing clothes maybe multiple times, cleaning herself and the weapon perfectly, all in that incredibly short time frame, they painted it as highly implausible.
So, defense highlights lack of physical evidence, plausible alternative explanations for her behavior, witness testimony supporting the paint stain, and the sheer logistical difficulty of her pulling it off undetected.
Exactly. They effectively created that reasonable doubt.
And the verdict.
Not guilty. After only about 90 minutes of deliberation.
90 minutes, that's fast.
Very fast. Suggests the jury wasn't wrestling with it too much. Public reaction was mixed shock, relief, disbelief.
And Lizzie's reaction?
Just said, I was the happiest woman in the world.
Wow. Okay, so after the trial, what happened to Lizzie?
She and Emma inherited their father's wealth, bought a fancy mansion, called it Maplecroft, lived together for a while.
But they eventually fell out.
Big time. Emma moved out. They became estranged. Apparently never spoke again. No one's quite sure why.
And Lizzie lived out her life there.
Pretty much, yeah. In relative seclusion, ostracized by much of Fall River society, despite her wealth. She died in 1927, taking any secrets with her.
So the mystery lingers. And other theories popped up, right?
Oh, tons. Some speculated about William Borden, an alleged illegitimate son of Andrew looking for money that was later disproven, though.
What about Emma? Could she have been involved?
Pure speculation. Maybe arranged it out of revenge, or some theories even suggest protecting Lizzie from abuse, but there's zero evidence for that.
Bridget Sullivan, the maid.
Also gets suggested sometimes. Maybe she had grievances or wilder theories about a secret affair with Lizzie, but again, pure speculation, no real motive or evidence.
Or just an unknown killer, a drifter.
That theory exists, bolstered by reports of a suspicious man seen nearby, and the lack of clear motive for Lizzie, maybe, but countered by the lack of forced entry, the personal nature of the killings, and how hard it would be to get in and out undetected.
Some even suggest Lizzie had some kind of psychological episode. Dissociative state.
That's another modern interpretation trying to explain the violence and her behavior. Still, just a theory.
That Vildar analysis we mentioned, their conclusion leans heavily towards guilty, right?
Yes, based purely on the circumstantial evidence trail. They emphasize the motive, money, pigeons, opportunity, the tight timeline, lack of forced entry, Abby likely trusting her attacker.
The number of blows overkill for Abby suggesting inexperience or rage, fewer for Andrew maybe suggesting more haste.
Exactly. Lizzie's lies, especially about the note, her trying to get Bridget out of the house washing windows, the possibility she changed clothes, maybe even wore her father's coat for his murder, and just the sheer weight of her inconsistent testimonies. For them, it all points one way.
But then you have the Smithsonian Magazine perspective.
Right, which argues her acquittal had a lot to do with who she was and the time she lived in, class specifically, nativism, gender stereotypes. Fall River was divided culturally, religiously, by class, ethnicity. The initial assumption was the killer must be a man, probably an immigrant, a foreigner.
Lizzie asking for a Yankee doctor plays into that nativism.
They suggest it reflects those biases. Her upper-class status made it hard for many to believe she, a respectable woman, could commit such butchery. Police suspicion grew because she didn't fit the grieving daughter mold, too calm, no tears.
And the newspapers took sides based on class.
Seems like it. The working-class Irish paper leaned towards guilt. The upper-class paper defended her. Women's groups also rallied, pointing out the all-male jury.
Her money bought a top legal team too, obviously.
Huge advantage. And the defense skillfully played on the lack of hard evidence and presented her as this virtuous, almost helpless Victorian lady, incapable of violence.
A Protestant nun, as one quote put it.
Yeah, and the jury itself, deliberately chosen from outside Fall River, mostly rural Protestant men, they likely shared those cultural assumptions. Her demeanor in court probably helped too.
So that view suggests she got away with it, partly because society couldn't conceive of someone like her being guilty.
That's the argument. Social context heavily influenced the outcome.
And finally, the biographics overview.
They basically present it as it often is, the great unsolved mystery. They cover all the key points: Lizzie's background, the tensions, the murders, the trial, the lack of proof, her later life, but ultimately emphasize that we just don't know for sure.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground. Compelling arguments for guilt based on circumstantial evidence and behavior.
And equally compelling arguments that the lack of physical evidence, combined with the societal biases of the time, led to a justified acquittal, or at least one heavily influenced by factors beyond the pure facts.
It really leaves you thinking. After hearing all this, exploring these different takes, what stands out most? What tips the balance for you, if anything?
That's the thing, isn't it? You can build a strong case either way depending on what you emphasize: the inconsistencies and suspicious actions versus the lack of blood and the societal context.
So, was Lizzie Borden this cunning killer who benefited from her status and the era's prejudices? Or was she truly innocent, caught up in horrific circumstances and maybe railroaded by suspicion?
The debate continues over a century later for a reason. The sources give us pieces, but the puzzle remains incomplete.
We definitely encourage everyone listening to maybe check out some of these sources we discussed, dig a little deeper, and see where you land on this enduring American mystery. It's fascinating stuff.